Hey guys, so this video we're going to do some standard modeling. I think it's important as you're starting to get more and more into 3D modeling that you understand that a lot of your basic tools like inset, extrude, bevel, they're some of your most important tools, and they're going to do most of the work that you need to do for the most part. Boolean end-gun workflow and using box cutter, hard ops, all that, that's great. Using subdivision workflow as well, where you do all quads. It's nice and neat at the end of it, but really being able to block things out using standard modeling techniques or even creating game models with standard modeling techniques is super useful. So that's all we're going to be doing in this video, is just kind of playing around with the idea of just working with mesh and geometry. I think it's important that you understand this is your toolkit, right? So your vertices, your edges, you can duplicate these things out and reuse them if needed, and just start putting them to work basically, because anything can be extruded, even if it's flat. And so shapes, of course, are 2D, right? And then forms are 3D, but anything that's a 2D shape and you extrude it, it becomes a form basically. And so that's kind of how I got started with 3D modeling in general. But basically, and when I learned, it was back in like 2001, when I got started in it anyways, using 3D Studio Max, you could use splines over there. But in Blender, you could do something like take the cube, merge it at center, select the single vertex, and just start extruding this out, creating some shape basically, right? And so once you realize you can do this, you can press F on the last two, press F, fill this whole thing in, press E, you can extrude it out. If you move it over the whole thing a little bit, this is the origin point, you can use something like a mirror modifier, right? And bisect it. And so now you can just start working on one side of this perhaps, and start doing some edits. You might have to flip it as well. If you see that little flip piece there. So you start playing around with just cutting things up as well. So if you want to just try cutting your shapes a little bit and seeing what you can do with them, you can do that. All right. There's nothing wrong with this. And this is your kind of your standard modeling techniques here, is just working the mesh with knife cuts and pushing and pulling vertices around for the most part. And so comboing it up with something like machine tools, though, is extremely useful, because machine tools adds a few features that Max and Maya have that Blender just simply doesn't. And it'll make you a little bit more efficient at working in general in Blender, and also Mesh Machine, because symmetrize feature is really cool. Instead of using a mirror modifier, a lot of times you can just symmetrize. So I'm going to apply that and use symmetrize now instead of the mirror, but I think you get the idea on that. And so then later on, you can go back and you can do some big chamfers perhaps. Maybe you want to take an edge later and just do a bevel on it and add some segments like that. That's a possibility. You can do things like this, all right? And so, even other things you can do, some of them are a little more challenging than others. Let's say we can do it right here, I think. Let's do a knife cut here. And if you want to know how to modify the knife tool the way I have it, you can watch my knife tool video. It's actually quite simple, but let's say I want to cut this out in this direction, going down right here like this, right? And so how would I do that? Well, with vanilla Blender anyways, you can use Alt-E extrude manifold, and a lot of times you can send it through, but sometimes it doesn't quite work out. In this case, I thought it was going to work out, but I don't think we're going to be able to do it. And so sometimes it has just a near miss like that, where it kind of goes back inwards a little bit. That's a possibility. So yeah, I didn't actually work out there. Let's see if we got anything else we can use it on. Maybe on this top edge. I don't know. It looks a little bit flatter to me, so maybe it'll work. Extrude manifold, yeah. And so you can see it does work. It'll cut into a mesh like this. It also can fill holes as well. But the problem is you can't go through the mesh, right? And so that's a little bit of a problem. And so one of the features that Max has, at least, is that you can cut through the meshes doing things like that. So if you had a cutout here like this, right, and we take that and we Alt E. If you have the Machine Tools Deus Ex version, you'll get Punch It with it. So Punch It is usually, well, it's a standalone add-on, but it's in the Deus Ex version Machine Tools as well. But basically, you hit Punch It there with the Alt E menu, hit Control, select an edge you want to line up to, and you can just start punching in that direction. Press W if needed a few times, and then that's it. So a really fun way to add details, because otherwise, if you're doing this manually, there's other ways you might be able to go about doing it. Actually, this one's kind of easy now to think about it. You can do extrude manifold right here, perhaps. Oh, nope, it didn't work out there either. A lot of times it'll eat away, but not in this case. So, we're only going to be able to do so much with that extrude manifold by the looks of it on this particular model. Sometimes it works out quite well in a lot of different situations, but yeah, your standard modeling tools still extremely useful, but ultimately having additional tools is more helpful in my opinion. But here's the thing: we can line up the different things. So like if I was using the move tool real quick, right? You'll see that it's lined up with the global origins. Instead, we can use normal. Okay, we could do things like that. So press S and Y, And we could do things like this as well if needed. So do think about your transforms, okay? Think about your origins or your pivot points, and also your snapping, because vertex snapping is still extremely useful. You want to just send something out like this, that's cool. But what if we wanted like this edge over here? Maybe we do a little cut here and we want to send this out at that same height there. And instead of trying to line everything up and get all crazy about it, we could turn on snapping, vertex snapping perhaps, okay? And we'll turn that off. We'll hit control to use it. But basically, we can hit E and then hit like Z to pull it out and hold control and we can snap to that same height level there. Or align these two basically, like doing something like that, which could be quite useful because maybe do a loop cut here, take these two, control E, bridge edge loops. And you see, we can start just using our tools to do all kinds of things. Change the number of cuts. You can change the smoothness of this thing a little bit if you wanted to. Make some really interesting shapes and forms and designs rather fast, just by playing with these vanilla tools for the most part. But a little bit extra definitely does not hurt. All right, so if we want to take this and go back to global, there's machine tools, pivot and snapping pie. There's global, right? And so using global and medium point basically. If you move things in edit mode, you'll see that the origin point doesn't change. So now I can use mesh machine to symmetrize. And these are just creature comforts for the most part, but using a mirror modifier could work. It's just going to speed you up. That's all I'm getting at. Trying to emphasize the speeding you up because if you're just getting into Blender and you're not ready to buy add-ons, it's one thing. But if you're trying to make some money doing this and doing some freelancing and stuff like that, or getting a job at a studio, you definitely want to speed up and be able to do things a little bit faster and higher quality as well at the same time. So with that in mind, you can also do skews, Control Shift S. Sometimes you have to X, Y, or Z to make it skew in different directions. But if you want to skew things, you can. And so if we want to skew from a certain point, what we'll find is that we can select a point. We'll use the active element. And now we can do Control Shift S and we can skew from that point, right? It might skew things a little bit weird, but and for the most part, that's what we just did anyways. And so we can keep playing with these ideas over and over and over again until we're pretty much done with them, like we're tired of doing it, basically. So we just keep doing this on our shapes all day long. Okay. You want to cut out more interesting designs or patterns, we certainly can. We can come through here and uh, maybe just do like a big inset first on this one or something. And after doing that inset, maybe we just want to kind of cut freely and create some kind of patterns or something that we want here. And we can do things like that. I think I hit the wrong spot there. I didn't want to connect those two. So I'm going to cut another line, dissolve that one. You see? Very forgiving kind of workflow here potentially. Inset, hold control, bam. You're able to add a lot of things very fast. I'm going to inset this, hold control, push it out. And we're going to try doing a Control Shift S just a little bit. Try to keep things flat if you're doing hard surface shapes, it helps, but it's not always going to be possible either. Shade auto smooth, maybe weight the normals. Whoop, weight normals. You can also add maybe like a bevel modifier. Put that above the weighted normals there, using different modifiers there, right? So yeah, you can make some cool looking stuff rather fast. Be careful with how you use the bevel modifier because if it's not, if you'll run into issues with it basically. So do be careful with how you lay out your meshes. It's going to cause a little bit of grief, but at first until you get used to working with it. But yeah, you're able to do this all day long. You can explore positive, negative space with your designs. You can cut out interesting kind of patterns. Line things up very carefully. Use your add-ons if available, and have fun. Really, that's the name of the game at the end of the day. Is you're trying to create things that are just interesting and fun to look at, maybe. So use your tools available too. Press J to join these ones real quick. You see how that's going to go now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of that, inset it, hold control, push it down. And these ones here, I'm going to go ahead and inset again, hold control, and push up. So we explore positive and negative spaces on it, right? And so we can keep doing that, by the way, as well. Like we don't have to stop with just this one, perhaps. Like in this area, for example, maybe we just do a cut. In this case, we'll press A twice with the knife tool. We can line up to 90 degrees. And maybe we do something like that. And then later on, we bevel something like that. So Control B and V, bevel the vertex. Now we can do another inset, and we can hold control and we can push down like that. There. See where that went? Maybe we want this to stay flat in this area, right? So we could potentially flatten that back out, doing like an align left, maybe dipping it down a little. Um, maybe just the bottom vertex. Who knows? There's different ways we can flatten that out, but it's different things we can do, perhaps, right? Let's pull that one down a little bit further, actually. Let's see if we don't get an error here. Let's do that, and then we can just pull these ones down as well. See what I'm saying? See how just moving around and doing some cuts and some shape changes, it really makes things look more interesting a lot faster by doing things like that. And so, your your mind or your imagination is a limit. Blender will do what you want it to do for the most part, and it's pretty efficient. It's pretty effective. One thing I do want to mention though is like a lot of guys they're working on certain projects. Like let's say I'm doing a UV sphere. Like so you're doing like some kind of that submarine thing on Bioshock or whatever, right? You still need to use booleans. All right. At the end of the day, booleans are still technically kind of standard modeling in a nutshell. It's been around since I've started modeling. It's still around today. Subdivision as well. So, um, machine tools, at least, you can do what's called a mesh cut, which you can't do in vanilla Blender. You can do it with box cutter hard ops, but you can't do it in vanilla Blender, as far as I'm aware, anyways. Um, you can do a knife project, but it's a little bit different. Now, mesh cut just is like a boolean, more or less. So you can do things like this super fast. And I'm not going to go through the process of cleaning this one up, but you can clean these things up a little bit. And you can use all kinds of selection methods like select loops, boundary loops, inner loop regions, rings, loops, right? Select mirrors even. So if I select the inner loop region, I can go ahead and do that, separate that. Some of you guys are struggling when I'm going to hide that for a sec, or struggling with creating like interiors of tanks and things like that. There's different ways to go on about doing it. You could use like a solidify modifier perhaps, or you could just take a shape like this and duplicate it and scale it down a little bit, and then Alt N and flip your normals. All right. You're probably thinking, wait, okay. So what? This is the thing. You press F. That faces backwards. I'm going to Alt N and flip it real quick. So all these come out the same, hopefully. And now we should be able to press F through here. Whoop. I don't know. That's not working. Hold on. Let's try deleting that one real quick. I don't know what happened there. Oh, I joined to the wrong thing. That's what it was. So we're going to this one here. I think. Yeah, F there. Okay. Now we can press F and just hold it down, and it'll fill because the vertices match. So we can do perfect quad strip, do a loop around there like that. We can select this on the inside here potentially. It can be a little bit hard to select it sometimes. Control Shift Control, or excuse me, Alt Shift clicking that. And now we do select loop in a region again. We can separate that selection. So we can do things like this. We can hit Alt H, select the door, /, go into isolation mode. We can hit E and X, pull that in, A, Alt N, recalculate outside. Now we got a little thickness to the door, perhaps. You see where this is going? We're able to do this kind of stuff over and over and over again. And when you're just doing standard modeling, it's a lot of fun at the end of the day. Because maybe you do something like this. You select the loop inner loop region. If we had cleaned up these edges, this might go a little bit better, but you can do like a slight inset and hold control. Maybe push something out like that, right? Cut a circle here in the middle, potentially. And we're going to use loop tools, do a circle, and we can try to do not flatten. You can see it rotates it, it acts a little bit suspicious, but don't flatten it. Uh, and we'll line it back up the best we can. Control E, bridge edge loops, right? So we could do things like that as well if needed, which is nice. Um, so we have that set up. Now we press H. Inside here, remember all that pulling mesh away from one another talk I had at the beginning? Uh, you can take things like this, and you can separate this as new mesh if needed. Like you just literally Shift D, duplicate it, P, separate selection, and then there you go. Now you got a new object, and you could probably pull this out on X if needed, if you wanted to do that. That's a possibility. Here's a trick though. If you got the machine tools add-on, you can pretty much control shift click through here and maybe get rid of that. And so now you just hit smart face, boom. It's a new mesh basically. And so we don't have to do all that jumping in and out of edit mode stuff and B and separate selection, all that. So we can do things like this and start to make whatever we want to make here, potentially. Also, it goes for the floor. You can duplicate a ring, perhaps. You do have to separate this one, and you select it, go back in edit mode, press A, F, and boom. There you go. Or on the flip side, if you wanted to get a little cheeky with machine tools. You can press F here, create a face, right? But you see, oh, maybe that was too high. Select this all the way through. If it'll let me. Oh, it is selected. All right, cool. Um, Press F here, right? And select the face if you can get a hold of it, and then separate the face as a duplicate, perhaps, right? So it's a little bit different because now you still got technically the face left behind, but it's whatever. You can do things like this if you really, really want to. So you can see it's also hard to select from the backside now that it's like that. So it's in there somewhere. I think it's in here still, is it? Yeah. So sometimes it's hard to navigate in these tight areas. Holding Alt, middle mouse clicking, you can get in and zoom in on things. If you hold Alt and try to gesture, you'll go top, bottom, left, right, all that fun stuff. But if something's in your way, just press H, hide it. If you're in edit mode, you can still hide other geometry, perhaps. Like all this is getting selected for some reason. And then, so we can press H and hide that and kind of work in this area on the backside now, in this area if we wanted. So we can hide, literally like half of this thing at a time if we wanted to. Just press Alt Z and then select the H. And so we can work half at a time. Because we might do that, we might come in here, do something like this, and then inset all that, inset it again, hold control. We can do numbers like that. We might select all this, do a boundary loop, do a bevel, and do something like that perhaps. You can grab these, Alt S perhaps. And so you can start layering in here as well if needed, just doing all kinds of nonsense really fast. Um, and having a lot of fun with it anyways. Don't forget to hit Alt H to get everything unisolated in edit mode at least. And so I want that floor though for some reason. I'm still thinking about it. So we're gonna duplicate piece. Whoa, what button did I just press? I unwrapped it or something? Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate it, hit P, separate selection, and AF, Alt N, flip to normal, bam. So I could just press E, extrude it up a bit, and scale it out a little if I needed to. Inset, hold control, push it up a little bit, and there you go. So we have a floor now at least. You can do things on other sections of mesh as well. Like if you wanted to do a cube real quick, this UV sphere is not really set up for this. It'd be better to maybe use like a quad sphere. But if you wanted to do something like this, where you do a machine tools mesh cut. You can go ahead and chop off something. This is called facing, right? So we created this cut all the way around here. We can select the loop inner region. We press Y and rip that. We can keep it as the same mesh. Y rips it so you can pull it apart. But basically, you can take that whole section, press F. You can take this section, press F. Select this thing, scale it down, move it around, or grab all that and extrude it backwards, possibly. There's just little things like this that happen all the time when you're 3D modeling. And you would think this is less forgiving to do just kind of standard modeling without subdivision or whatever. Yeah, it's not really. A lot of times you can get away with just putting additional vertices in between places like this, and it doesn't really affect the shading too much. It does affect it, but it's just not too much. And so you can create some kind of crazy looking cuts and things if you wanted to. So if you do like an inset and hold control and push that down, you'll see it still shades all right. It's not too bad. It's not perfect, but it's definitely not too bad either. So if you were to try to do like a bevel here on this though, and you use a lot of segments, your shading may still work, but a lot of times it starts to break down. Just keep that in mind. In this case, it's actually not too bad at all. It's pretty impressive. You do a weighted normal, it might look bad though. All right, so just be careful with that one. Anyways, standard model is pretty awesome. You can do a lot of stuff with it and have fun with it. Works on everything for the most part, right? So it's a really fun thing to do. And I find you'll use just your standard tools more and more as you get more into modeling that thing. Uh, Boolean ingun definitely is fun and using all those different tricks, but this is like the base of all that. And so I'm going to put a cursor here. So Shift S cursor is selected, and I'm going to go ahead and do an empty plane axis. So I can take this and then Shift select that, Control P. I'm going to set the parent to the empty, so I can rotate this open if I wanted, and I won't lose like the maybe the local orientation here on this one. So basically, if I want to reset it, I can backspace the empty in the rotation field. So reset it, right? So we can always just, test our mechanics this way as well. Not that that really has anything to do with modeling much, but it is important to test the mechanics of your models as well. So do things like that potentially, right? And you'll see here in this particular case, backspace it real quick. Um, it may have a little clipping issue here where it kind of hits the edge here. And so sometimes shapes like this, you gotta think about how they're going to function as well, right? Door obviously will need to function appropriately. And so we might just scale that in so it's something like when you carve a pumpkin, right? Like the lid sits in there, right? That's kind of what's going on there. So it shouldn't clip as much now. It might do a little bit in the corners here, but we could definitely change the overall dimensions of this and maybe get some different results or maybe curve out the edges here as well, things like that. So yeah, play around with 3D modeling. Do your standard tools there. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of stuff you can utilize. Um, I don't think I could cover them all in one video in any short amount of time because a 20-minute video is not so bad, but an hour video you'd learn a little bit more. But this could be an all day thing where you just go over every little tip, you know. And so play around with the tools. Watch some of my other videos. You'll see when I'm using them. I'm doing a lot of similar stuff to this because these turn into subdivision models usually very quickly, or they can turn into just be good concepts to kind of work on better Boolean Ingon models, perhaps. So it's definitely something you want to do is just practice kind of working out mesh as fast as possible and utilizing it in as many different ways as possible as well. The better you get at modeling, you'll be able to fly through it a lot faster because you still have things like rigging and animating. You don't need to spend all your time modeling and learning how to model necessarily. So do spend your time on standard modeling first, then play around with Boolean Ngon and then subdivision after. Okay. I think you'll have a much more enjoyable time doing that. It's one of the better ways of learning, in my opinion. So, anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll check you out in the next one.